What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I've got an outstanding guest for you guys today. Really stoked to be talking with Joshua Hubbs. He is a guy that just loves photography. He really is outstanding at it. I love people that have skills with photography, and I love bringing people on that way because you know what you're doing. But he's a freelance photographer on the side and works with Homeland Security for his 9 to 5. And so I just wanted to bring Joshua on here just to talk a little bit about things that he loves with, again, photography, how he's got an eye for it, how he can capture things. He loves archery. He loves hunting. He loves shooting his bow, and just all the things that I really enjoy. So with that being said, Joshua, who are you for people that don't know who you are?
So I'm Joshua Hubbs. I love videography and photography, and I'm a diehard archer, to be 100% honest with you. I picked up archery about 11 years ago, and I haven't touched a rifle since then. Actually, this will be the first year that I actually have a rifle tag. But other than that, it's been, 10 years that I haven't touched a rifle. So bow and videography and photography have been pretty much my go-to since then.
Oh, that's amazing. And yeah, you've got a pretty sweet rifle set up there. It's a Christensen Arms, right?
Yes, sir. It's a Christensen Arms Ridgeline FFT. It's the 7mm PRC. It's a tack
Oh,
driver.
man. Yeah, that 7mm PRC, it definitely has caught my eye. I I personally haven't upgraded my rifles in a while because I think the last 4 or 5 years I've dove into archery, and so that's where all my funds are going,
Yeah.
upgrading all my gear and stuff. But I'm kind of jealous that things it's beautiful. Not only I'm sure it shoots amazing because I've got some buddies that have Christensen arms and they are tack drivers, but that 7mm PRC is just it's kind of a new caliber, isn't it? When did that one come out?
I believe it came out last year. I think Hornady was the first one to create that round. And yeah, I'm super stoked because I've got some buddies who've got rifle elk tags, and they're like, hey, if you don't mind, we'd love to test that round. I'm like, yeah, the more feedback I get on it would be awesome. So excited to put it through the ringer this year.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So, with that being said, what got you into? Because obviously, there's a big difference between photography and Homeland Security. So, what got you into photography to start with?
Yeah, so um, when I started out with it, I was running around in the mountains and just bow hunting by myself, and I'd come back down from the mountains and I'd tell my parents these crazy stories and all my buddies these crazy stories, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like sure you got that close to an elk, and sure you saw this." And so I was like, you know what? I started running around with my phone, and from there I just kind of slowly upgraded from my phone to a DSLR and started running the videos and the photography. And to be honest, I just kind of like was self-taught there for a little bit. I had no idea about the rule of thirds and all this other framing and stuff. I just was like, oh, this is cool and this is cool. And once I started taking the photos and people started like liking the photos and saying, hey, you should try this, then I kind of progressed from there into being more proficient with the camera and everything else.
Oh, that's awesome. So basically, it started because people were saying that there's no way you did this.
Yeah, nobody believed me. I'd get close to stuff and be like, "Oh, you didn't see that," or "Sure, it was a 7 point," and I'm like, "No, I'm serious." You know.
hmm That's awesome. That's really cool. And and did that start along with archery, or was that a little bit before archery?
So yeah, my photography side started a little bit before archery. I would say that was probably 13 years ago, 14 years ago. I started doing that, and then as soon as I picked up a bow, that's when I went from like a phone to a DSLR, and I would say it started progressing from there because I was just out in the woods more, scouting, putting in more time, and out hunting by myself.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. So with that being said, you got into photography with your phone. You upgraded your camera. You learned some stuff. Kind of got self taught. Have you taken any courses since then?
Honestly, no. Everything I've done is a little bit of YouTube videos here and there, like tutorials where I'm trying, like, if I want to figure out like how to tweak something or change something when it comes to editing, or when it comes to my style of photography. Honestly, I have people I follow on Instagram, and it's like, oh, I really like how they frame this shot, and I keep it
Hmm.
in the back of my mind, and I'll tweak it a little bit to put my own little spin on it. But that's kind of where some of like the ideas come off of. I mean, our community is pretty big on Instagram, so we always bouncing ideas off of each other, and you'll see photos, you're like, oh, I've seen a photo like that, but somebody else put their own spin on it, so it's even cooler.
Yeah, No, exactly. I agree with that. It's kind of a big community for sure, and something that we can all learn from. And there's a lot of things that are going on, whether it be on social media or do you have, other than your Instagram page, do you have a blog or anything else that you do along with the photography?
Honestly, no, I haven't started anything yet, but I've been thinking about starting like a little blog or a podcast even. But I just, with the 9 to 5, things are a little tight already as is, so I kind of keep it just to Instagram.
Yeah, no, I hear that for sure. And how do you get your freelance photography out there? Like, do you just use Instagram as promotions, or is it more word of mouth? What do you do to kind of spark up interest in that?
Yeah, so to be honest with you, it's a lot of Instagram. I use Instagram as more of a networking tool because there's a lot of people on there, and I would say in this industry, it's it's what you know. I mean, you got to be pretty decent at what you do to be able to progress through the industry, but it's also who you know to be able to get those opportunities to be able to progress. So I'll use Instagram, make connections that way, and from there, kind of get little odd and end jobs, learn from there, and then people get to see my work, and then from there, it's kind of just word of mouth.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I would agree. There's a lot of who in the
Yeah.
whether it be archery or photography or outdoors in general. It's definitely a lot of who you know. So with that, you got into photography. Then what drew you to archery hunting over any other style of hunting?
This is a good one. So, my dad, he introduced me to hunting a long time ago. Like I was in a backpack with him going in the woods when I was little, and when I started hunting, he was a rifle hunter, and he got into the long range game, and we started, taking shots, 800 yards, and I was like, oh, this is fun. But we were in Oregon, we glass clear cuts. You'd spot an animal and shoot the animal, and then it was just walk to the animal. It was kind of over and done with. Um, and I seen all these hunts on the outdoor channel. I'm like, I want to pick up a bow. I want this challenge of getting close. And so kind of just flipping the scale instead of doing the long range game and seeing how far I could go and shoot. I just like I want to see how close I can get, and that kind of flipped the table for me. I picked up a bow. Honestly, my first bow was a Bowtech in Eugene, Oregon, and I met Henry Bass, who's a professional shooter, and he's like, hey, you know nothing about it. Here, I'll teach you stuff. And he kind of taught me. And from there, I dove right into it head first.
So Henry Bass, I've heard the name before, and I'm sure his name's known, but I personally don't know him. How did you end up in Oregon to get a bow when you're down in Arizona?
So I lived in Oregon for about 9 to 10 years. I think I was in Oregon. And my time there, I ended up making a connection there at Bowtech, which was Henry, and later it was Mike Harrington. And those two just sparked my interest, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go to there. Started talking to them at Bowtech, and from there it just they kind of were my fuel to my spark. Once I got that, they just were super helpful in pushing me towards it and getting me the connections I needed to keep progressing through there.
Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome. I know there's a lot of good people up in Oregon, especially in the Eugene area, that know their stuff when it comes to archery. So you got linked up with the Bowtech guys. You started shooting a Bowtech. What was your kind of main purpose with getting behind a bow? Was it for you were thinking maybe you'd go the target route for fun or hunting? What kind of took you down that path? All right, we are back. We've had some technical difficulties and some health difficulties, and we had a whole bunch of stuff happen over the last little bit, guys. That's why we're dressed different. We're not wearing the same smelly clothes from yesterday. So, yeah, so we got Josh back here, and I had totally spaced the fact that you work with Grizz Media and Hunt Wars and everything like that. So definitely want to dive down that train as well, so you can talk about that for people that don't know about Hunt Wars and Grizz Media, what you guys do, etc. But we were talking about elk hunting and just kind of how majestic these beasts are and how they can disappear, how quiet they are, etc. But you've got a nice elk rack there on the wall behind you. Tell us the story behind that one.
So this one right here is actually my first Arizona match set that I found. We gave him a 35-inch spread. Comes out to be about 360-inch bull. I was hiking the woods one day. My buddy was like, "Hey, I'm not feeling good. I'm gonna stay at the house." I was like, "All right." And then I got out there, and I really wasn't feeling good either. So I was like, "I'm just gonna cut this hike short." And I walked maybe 200 yards off the road, got into some thick stuff, and I was like, you know what, forget this, I'm gonna go home. I made it like a U-turn and came back, turned around a bush, and they were laying side by side. So I colored them back up myself, and now they hang on the wall. But yeah.
That's awesome. That's pretty sweet, man. So down there in Arizona, you've been there for a couple years now. Have you had the opportunity to hunt elk in Arizona?
I have not. No, this will actually
Okay.
be the first year. I personally don't have a tag, but my buddy has an archery tag, and I have a couple buddies who have rifle tags. So I'm kind of excited to get out there and just see how it is and how it all plays out there.
Yeah, for sure. So then your elk experience was mainly Oregon, Roosevelt's, or have you gone elsewhere? Have you gone to other states and hunted elk?
It's going to be Oregon and Idaho mostly. Those are the two states that I've hunted, just because they both have really nice OTC hunts. In Oregon, I started off hunting Roosevelt elk on the coast, and that's a different beast. That was before I picked up a bow, so during rifle season. I've killed a couple bulls with rifles, just never with a bow yet. And yeah, the difference between your coastal Rosies and your Rocky Mountains, I'd say like Eastern Oregon and even and into Idaho, it's a huge difference. The size difference of the body of your Rosies just dwarfs those Rockies immensely.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
So I guess I've never seen a Roosevelt compared to a Rocky Mountain elk in person. So you're saying because their racks don't get as big, or do
correct.
they?
I would say that their racks don't get as long. You don't have
Mm,
these crazy sweeping long main beams, but the mass on the Rosies is quite a bit different from the Rocky Mountain elk. And I think that's just because the Rosies grow up in a thicker environment, so they don't get those long beams, but they get short, stubby ones.
mm,
Um, and you do, I mean, occasionally, I mean, Cam's killed a couple 300-inch bulls out there because in clear cuts they typically get like a little bit longer main beams on them as they're going in and out of the brush in an older timber. um, but yeah, the body size of them, I mean, the comparison, they're like a half size. Like if you took a Rocky Mountain elk and just expanded him in all directions, I would say that would equate to about a Rosie.
wow. That's crazy. I guess I don't know why I've never put those two together, but why do you think that is? Is there a reason behind that? I didn't realize it was that drastic of a difference in size.
Yeah, as far as body goes, to be honest, I'm not sure. Maybe it has to do with the abundance of food in year round that they have in the location. It's always
Mm,
green there on the coast. Their winters are a little milder, so they can keep more fat on them. But other than that, I'm not really sure.
hmm. Oh, that's cool. So if you had to choose between Rosie's and Rocky Mountain elk, what would you choose?
I take Rockies all day long, and the
Yeah.
reason I take Rockies all day long is because of the terrain that the Rocky Mountain elk are in. I really like chasing them in those high country, high mountains, and the aspens and all that. Those are just fun hunts, and they're beautiful hunts. The coastal is nice. Don't get me wrong, but it's same steepness, same all that, but it is thick and wet
Hmm.
most of the time. And no thanks. I'd rather be up
Yeah.
high in the dry mountains.
Gotcha. Okay. No, that makes sense. So I know that they relocated some Rocky Mountain elk out east. I can't remember what year it was, but I think it was back in the 90s or late 80s. Um, and now there's a couple herds out there. There's one in North Carolina and there's one in Kentucky. And Kentucky's doing their first actual elk hunt. It was either last year or the year before where I think they only give out like one or two tags. Um, and those elk actually have evolved to be a lot smaller because they're also in those thicker forests as well. And their antlers don't seem to get as big, but I think their bodies are actually smaller. I've never seen them in person. I didn't realize we had elk in North Carolina until um, I don't know. It was probably when I first started looking into elk. But of course, last year when I came home empty handed, my mom sent me a video of a traffic jam in North Carolina in the mountains
Yeah.
because of elk. They're just all over the road. I was like, oh, thanks. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Heck yeah.
But Yeah, that'd be a cool hunt to go back east and do that. But anyway, so you've gone, Idaho, Oregon, you're going Arizona elk hunting. What I guess we've talked a little bit about this before, but just remind me what is it about elk for you that really stands out? Like, why is that the animal of choice that you would go after?
That's a good question. So, uh, I like to pursue elk, one because of the terrain that they're in, but two, it's like that majestic staple of the mountains. Everybody has this big 6 point bold dream of harvesting. It's kind of everybody's goal, and it's an animal that in some states it's only draw, so it takes a while for people to get them, or you have to hunt out of state. And when you finally get the opportunity, it's a challenge. It's not a walk in the park. These things don't just live where you can walk out like a back door in a flat field all the time and just go get an elk. Most of the time you're hiking mountains and putting in miles, and there's a lot of challenges that come with them. And for me, chasing them and like mule deer, it's just the pure challenge and chase that I fell in love with. And also, who doesn't love screaming bull elk? Like, just chasing a bull in the rut is like nothing I've ever experienced before in my life.
Yeah, no, for sure. And with that being said, they're definitely more interactive, for sure. And I love seeing it. So I've only been around once where they actually got in a brawl, and that just the sound of the clanking of their antlers together, it really doesn't compare. There's not really anything that you can compare, hunting elk to. Again, I love mule deer. They're awesome. They live in some cool terrain, but I don't get the same excitement that I get out of an elk. I even get excited when I'm driving down the road, going to maybe I'm on a trip or even going hunting, and I find that they've changed the sign, the yellow sign, from deer crossing to elk crossing. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, like
Yeah.
it's a good feeling. It feels good.
Also, like, I don't care if it's your first time or your thousandth time hearing a bugle, it always gets me excited. Like, that bugle
Oh
is,
yeah,
it's just one of those sounds that I think it puts a smile on everybody's face or gets somebody excited. It's just addictive.
exactly. Oh, 100%. They are. It's there's something about it, and I don't know if it's because it's in our DNA. I don't know if it's something that I don't know. I feel like it's a lot like archery. And I know not everyone feels this way, but anytime I pick up my bow, it's like, all right, I get to shoot some arrows. It feels
Yeah.
great. And it's just exciting that way. So, um, man, that's awesome. I want to talk a little bit about the Grizz Media and Hunt Wars.
Okay.
So talk to me about Grizz Media. What do you guys do there? And then we'll get into Hunt Wars.
Oh yeah, so Grizz Media is founded by Jesse Anderson. He kind of created it. It's kind of his baby, and he expanded it by hiring on myself, Kobe Owens, and Logan and Andy. We kind of work all together, and as a group, we're trying to transition more into where it's like us hunting and us filming each other. But right now, we pick up odd and end jobs and we help film other hunts and with other companies as well. And then Jesse does graphic design and logo design for a lot of outdoor companies on the side.
Gotcha. So it's a outdoor based media that you guys kind of freelance things, whether it be photography, videography, and then graphic design stuff.
Yes, yeah, exactly. For right now, yeah. We're hoping to eventually transform it into where, we can it'll be us and our hunts and we'll be out there filming each other more or less. But yeah, as right now, kind of freelancing around and doing our stuff on the side too.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's awesome. So with Grizz Media, then Hunt Wars. Now I met the guys. I think it was 3 years ago at TAC was when I first met them. And they were pretty new. When did Hunt Wars start?
They're on season 4 this year, so season 3, yeah. So 3 years ago, they would have just started kind of pushing that.
Gotcha. Okay. So with Hunt Wars, how'd you get linked up with those guys? What's kind of the story behind that?
So I was with Grizz Media, and through Grizz Media, I noticed they put out an application on Instagram saying they were looking for videographers or photographers, and went on there and jumped at the bit, talked to Wes and Britt a little bit, and was like, hey, I'd love to come out there and film with you guys if you're interested. Kind of showed them what I did with Grizz Media, and then that kind of they're like, okay, yeah. So actually, Kobe Owens and myself, we went out there and we filmed a New Mexico, excuse me, not New Mexico. It was a Mexico Coos deer hunt, January of this year, and then from there we kind of built a relationship and gone forward from there.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you do stuff with Hunt Wars, have you ever participated in Hunt Wars? I don't think I've seen you on any of the
No,
actual competitions. Okay, so you go out and you do media stuff with Hunt Wars, and kind of explain that for people that don't know what Hunt Wars is. What's kind of the premise behind it? Why is it created? What is it for?
yeah. So Hunt Wars is well, for example, this year we have a New Mexico archery elk hunt, right? The
Mm-hmm.
application fee is $100, and there's far less people that put in for Hunt Wars than put in for an actual draw tag for the state, right? So you have pretty high odds of drawing with Hunt Wars to hunt a different state that maybe you've never hunted. And this year we have elk and mule deer hunting, and so those would be you pay $100 for your application, or you could
Mm-hmm.
pay more depending on how many applications you wanted to submit. And then you're in the system, you get drawn, you get interviewed, and based off your interview and how you interview through the questions, they'll place you in a hunt, either a muzzleloader elk hunt, archery mule deer, or rifle mule deer. Those are the hunts we had this year. And then there'll be a couple teams. There's usually 3 or 4 teams that go out there, one shooter and one person that comes with you. So, for instance, if it was you and I who drew, we could decide who's going to be the shooter and then who's going to kind of be the caller or the glasser or the spotter. And then you go on your hunt. The Hunt Wars part of it is when you get out there, there are deductions and points that you can gain from the distance you have harvested your animal, the age of the animal, and the time spent out there. So there's kind of a scorecard that they have, how they score everything, and you can get deductions. If you're shooting further distance with a rifle instead of trying to get closer, or if you're with a bow and you shoot a further distance instead of getting closer. There's deductions there, deductions for different age classes, and you can get extra points for certain age classes or getting closer. And from there, they kind of pick a king of camp is how it works.
Mm,
And your whole hunt's
gotcha.
filmed by other hunters like myself who go out there and film you guys.
Cool. So Hunt Wars basically there's $100 application fee, and then they cover everything else. If you win that, they cover all of your expenses for the hunt, everything like that.
Correct. Yeah. The food and everything
Cool.
at camp's provided for you. All you got to do is show up and ready to go.
Cool. Now, are there penalties because when you say you can gain points for how far away you harvested the animal, is that the closer you get, the more points you get, or the further away the shot is, the more points you get?
Correct. So the closer you get, you get positive points. The further you'll get, you
Gotcha.
get negative points. The whole thing is behind it is we want hunters to come out there, but still be ethical and have a fun time, and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
harvest a mature animal. It's not just the point to come out there and the first deer you see, if it's a spike, you shoot it and you're done. So we want you to be out there and have fun, but still hunt with maturity and ethics on the side as well, not just to win a competition.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's why when you first said that, I was like, that. I want to clarify that because it's not like how many yards you get points for. So, okay. No,
Yeah,
that's awesome. And then I guess, you get the recording of it. You get to have an amazing experience. You get to go hunt in some areas that you may never get to hunt again in your life. I mean, there's a lot that goes into the Hunt Wars thing. So I guess, and maybe I should have the guys on from Hunt Wars, but do you know why they started it? What was the whole purpose? Why they even got this thing going? I mean, it's a big production, and it's a lot of cost to be able to take 4 or 6 or however many people they take as teams to go out there. Plus all the sponsorships, because I've seen a couple of episodes. I think I watched one season. You get the glassing, you've got the wall tents, you've got the food, you've got the tags, you've got all the gear that they're decked out in. Like they give you, clothing and optics and bino harnesses, all this stuff, right? So there's a lot that goes into it. Why would you start something like that when people can just go hunt and buy their own stuff?
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure on that one, but Troy is the one who created Hunt Wars, so he would be the guy to talk to about like what the premise and the idea behind the whole project was.
Cool. Well, I'll have to get his contact info from you. And I know I've messaged with whoever runs their Instagram. We've messaged back and forth, especially
It would
since.
have been Britt, and now it's me who's on their social media side. So it was probably
But
Britt.
I guess about 3 years ago when we started, when I met him at TAC.
Okay, yeah, it'd be Britt or Wes.
Gotcha. Okay. I think it was a dude, so it's probably Wes. Um, cool. Yeah, I'll have to get Troy's information and get him on here so we can talk about it because I like the idea of that kind of competition. There's also other things too, right? Where they'll shoot at camp and have different archery competitions at camp. Am I mixing that with something else or?
So that episode, yeah, what happens was, it's a draw. I believe in
Hmm.
that episode there, nobody tagged out. And to
Oh,
figure
that's
out
right.
who the king of the camp was going to be, they had a little shoot off there at camp to just kind of determine who was going to win the competition. But yeah, it's a great time when we go out there. There's always fun games that we play when we get back off the hill, and there's always good food. So you can always count on it being a great time out there.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, you know, you work with a bunch of media companies. We talked, yesterday
Yeah.
about the I want to say yesterday for people that are listening on audio probably doesn't make a difference. But if you're watching this, you're gonna see that we've changed clothes and there's a few other different things in the video here. But um, we were talking about how you got into camera work, etc. Did you do digital design and a bunch of other things before you got into using a camera, or how did you even get involved in Grizz Media? Was it the camera, or what got you into that?
Yeah, so honestly, I mean, it started with an iPhone taking photos, and then I just wanted to up my game. I actually
Mm.
bought a Canon 80D DSLR. It's kind of an entry level camera. From there, I started taking photos and upgrading my glass. And then when I was posting on Instagram, earlier in this, when we were talking, I was telling you how I like to look at other people's photos to kind of get an idea or see how they're editing stuff
Mhm.
and see how I can challenge myself out there when I'm out taking photos. And Jesse Anderson ended up being one of the guys who I'd seen on there, which was Grizz Media. It's like, wow, I really like this guy's photos. So I kind of talked to him back and forth, trying to pick his brain on like how he took photos and what he did. And eventually we just kept talking, and he kind of liked the work I did, and we started working together with Grizz Media. That's kind of how I got transferred into there. So yeah, everything kind of happened from a camera. And
Mm.
again, everything was done trial and error. I picked up a camera, started taking photos. People on Instagram would be like, "Wow, this is a horrible photo." And I'm like, "Okay, why is it a horrible photo?" They would tell me, give me some feedback. I'm like, "I love this. I'm going to take it. I'm going to run with it." So I'd go back, I'd take some photos, and then somebody's like, "Oh, this is a great photo. Try the rule of thirds." And so then from there, I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm going to try framing stuff now." And then I learned how to frame and edit. And like Fred Bohm, I believe is his name. I
Mm.
really love his photography style, and so I would pick his brain and read his articles, and I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to start applying to my camera and photography side and kind of build my own form.
Yeah, no, for sure. Have you and that's really awesome that you take the feedback, you adjust it, you make things better. You don't get upset. A lot of people will take criticism in a negative light, and I can see why that's the case, but it's funny that you mentioned that that's a big deal and how you've come to accomplish what you have is that you were open to that feedback. And I think that's something that's lacking in a lot of, I mean, just about everything. I'll say that communication is the reason for a lot of failures and a lot of successes, whether it be companies or relationships. If you don't communicate clearly, it doesn't matter how much money you're making or how much money you have or how much time you spend with each other. If you're not communicating, that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
But if you're communicating, you can get through any, whether it be in a relationship, you can get through any hardship, whether it be financial, physical, whatever. You can get through it if you're communicating. If you're in a business or like in your sense, putting things out online, you're putting yourself out there and you're putting it out there and receiving that communication in a filter of, I'm not going to get upset. I'm going to accept that feedback and keep going with it. That's awesome. I mean, that speaks volumes to your character. to the person that you are. So that's really cool. Now with with your photography, the rule of thirds and everything like that, that you've learned so far, what would you say to people that are maybe getting into photography? And I know there's so many different realms of photography. You've got like the family pictures versus portraits versus, but say someone wants to get into the style of photography that you're into, which is more outdoorsy, products. You don't even, to be honest with you, you don't even, I guess you do products, but it's not like flat lays and things like that. You use the products, you're taking pictures of them in their it's maybe not natural element, but you know what I'm saying. You take pictures of them outside where they're going to be used. If someone wants to get into that kind of photography, what would be something that you'd recommend to those people?
I would first just start off with go with what you what you want to do, right? So if you want to take a photo of it at a certain angle, just take a photo of it at what you think looks awesome. Get the photo, and then I would put it on social media and just ask for honest feedback on it and take the constructive criticism, but don't take it, don't take it to heart. These people are trying to help you out from other photographers, or send it maybe to a
Mm-hmm.
photographer that you trust and follow as well, and say, hey, what do you think of this, and what could you do different, or what would you recommend me doing differently? And then from there, I like to think of it as you're going to gain all this information from all these people, and it's like a recipe, right? You get all these ingredients, but now you get to choose how you're going to use them to make your finished product, and they'll kind of give you your own style. I recommend that because then that helps you find your style of photography and videography that's going to make you stand out from everybody else. If you go on YouTube and follow Peter McKinnon or some of these other guys, or go on Instagram and just start copying one guy, it's their work but copied onto your
Mm-hmm.
side. So it's easier to be more creative, I think, when you just run and gun with your ideas originally and then mold it from there.
Yep. No, exactly. I definitely agree with you on that because, to some degree, it's hard to find your own style when it's saturated market. I mean, photography is everywhere. Now everyone has an iPhone, and that's really what I use is an iPhone. And to a trained eye, you can tell a difference. To someone that isn't trained in photography, you really can't tell much of a difference between an edited iPhone photo and an edited picture out of a camera nowadays. And so it's awesome, to know that you're creating your own style when literally everyone could be a photographer in a certain degree at this day and age. Someone else that I wanted to bring up to you, and I was looking him up and I found him here. Have you spoken with David Martinez in these mountains?
I have not, no.
Okay, I'll have to send you his link because he's a pretty awesome dude. He does a lot of bighorn sheep photography, videography. I mean, it looks like he's like right there up on the sheep, but I know he's got one of those big old lenses.
I've seen
But I
some
mean,
of
he gets. Oh, you have.
the,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah. He's man. He's got like just looking at. He gets the detail of the eye color on mountain goats and sheep. Like what the heck?
yeah.
Like it just blows my mind. But if you had to choose, I guess, between wildlife photography and photography of, I mean, I guess, let me back up here. What would you describe your style of photography as?
Everywhere.
Ever?
Everywhere. Um, so I really like to do the product photography, but like you said, I don't like to do lays as much because there's a lot of people who do lays, and I think AJ over at Night at the Apex, I mean, he kills it on the layouts there
Hmm.
all the time, and I love it. But the thing is like you can go on his page, you see how he does a layout, you take a photo, and then it's kind of like copying him, and I don't want
Hmm.
to be like that. So my style is like you were saying earlier. I like to use the product in the field, or how you would be using the product in, like, I guess you would say action shots kind of way. Like this is the use of it. And
Hmm.
then I also now just started recently because of Gray and Mitch over at Creek Bed Photography. I got a camera lens, and I was thinking, Arizona's a great spot, but everything's a draw hunt, right? But there's some big bulls I see out there. I was like, well, I can shoot them still, but I don't have to kill them. I'll just use my camera, right? So I'm taking the hunting aspect of it And with the lens I have, I still have to get within that 100-yard range. So it's kind of like a bow hunt. Jumped into the wildlife side of photography there a little bit. And I can't wait to show you guys what I get this year. It's going to be pretty epic, I'm hoping. So, yeah, it's kind of just everywhere. I'm a little bit dabbling in bits and pieces here and there.
Cool. If you had to choose one thing that you could take photos of for the rest of your life, what would it
It
be?
definitely be a hunt. It would be like an archery elk hunt or an archery mule deer hunt. Like, if not just one thing, but like a hunt with somebody, because there's so much that goes into it. You got all day and all night. You can get the sunrise, sunset photos, but you're bow hunting.
Hmm.
There's so many different photos you can get on a hunt that I think are just awesome.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. You had a good response there. You weren't thinking about it for very long. Um, so what I guess what is a goal of yours that you have with what you're doing? Because obviously you're providing beautiful content. You're sharing it with the masses. You use quality gear, and you work with some great media companies, and obviously encouraging the hunt wars. But what's a personal goal that you've got maybe over the next 5 years that you're wanting to improve on, and maybe even, I mean, is it a goal of yours to get out of your 9 to 5 and to eventually do your own thing, or what are you aiming for with photography, or I guess marketing or media in general?
Definitely. Honestly, if I could, yeah, I would love to be able to start making enough with the photography and videography work that I could walk away from the 9 to 5 and just film and hunt. Even if I'm not the hunter, I would just be happy running around out there with the camera, filming and taking photos. Like, that would be a dream come true for me. Um, so yeah, 5-year plan would be definitely, if I could build it up enough to go out there, or build up with Hunt Wars or Grins Media enough that I could just jump over to one of them and call it that. That would be awesome.
Cool. I like that plan. And then as far as the equipment that you use um, with hunting, what is your style of hunting? Do you prefer bivy backpacking? Do you prefer mobile, where you go in for a day, 3 to 4 miles off the trailhead, hunt that area all day and night, come out in the dark and move spots? What's your style of hunting that you prefer?
So I would say I'm a mix between mobile and backpacking in. I really, I'm I'm a spot and stock guy, and I like to get in there and find animals. But if there's a lot of pressure in one area, I'm never set in stone on just one spot. I usually try to find multiple spots that I can move to, or maybe even at a whim, and just throw a dart at a board and be like, okay, I'm going there. Um, I like to explore a little bit, and just because back home in Oregon, I'd get to a spot, I've been scouting it. I know the elk are there. Great. You get to the trailhead, there's 8 trucks there, and you get back there and you start just hearing people bugling. And it's like, all right, I at least didn't have my heart set on this spot. So it's okay. Let's go ahead. Let's try a different spot. And from there, I've learned a lot about elk and learned a lot about the environment, because you'll hit spots and you're like, oh, I would have never looked at this spot to go to, but because there's pressure here and here, I looked at a map and I was like, okay, well, this is the furthest spot from the pressure. I'm gonna go in there. You get in there and you're by yourself, and it's just an awesome experience.
Oh, that's cool. So give us a rundown then, I guess, of your gear. Everyone likes to talk gear, and figure we might as well with someone that likes to take product photography and knows his gear. Uh, Say on a typical, I don't know, 4 day hunt with a
Okay.
bow, um, what are you taking in your backpack? Like, give us 5 things, your top 5 items that you're taking. Leave food aside, leave weapon aside. Your top 5 gear items that you're putting in your backpack.
So I always have a water purification of some kind. I think that's important, just because you just never know what could happen out there,
Hmm.
and water is pretty important. From there, I always will take,
Pause on that.
yeah.
What preferred method of water purification do you have? Iodine tablets, where you filter through a little mesh, get all the crap out, and then iodine? Do you pump it? Do you use a Sawyer Grail filter? What's your go-to?
I don't want to say it backwards. I think it's MSR, right? I believe
Mhm.
that makes a little pump filter. I use their little pump filter there just because it's compact. Throw it in the pack, don't have to worry about it, and I can just pump up. I think it pumps up to like 100 gallons or something before it's like you need a new little filter, and that's plenty for when I'm out there.
Oh yeah, 100%. Cool. Sorry, go ahead. There's just so many ways that I want to
Yeah.
clarify and kind of pick your brain on that.
The other thing too about the filter that's nice is I use a hard side hydration system,
Mhm.
so it does make it nice. I can just pump straight into the bottle, and sometimes there's Life Straw and stuff or Sawyer even. You can just connect it mainstream and just fill up your bottle and then go straight from your hose, which is another way that I'll do it sometimes. If I'm going on weight, that's how I'll condense it down. Is I'll just plug it right into my hose and then go that way.
So you're that hybrid where you like the Nalgene, but you have the hard side hydration, hose coming out.
Yeah. Yep.
Gotcha.
I
Cool.
really enjoy that one.
Nice.
The next thing that I do take is that I think is pretty important is just some way to make fire if the weather goes bad, wind goes bad, that's something I'm going to be taking out there. And then I've always got Onyx. Onyx is on my phone. I always keep that and a backup GPS. It's usually a Garmin, just because back there in the backcountry, again, you never know what could happen. Maybe your phone dies or you didn't charge your battery pack like you thought, and now you're kind of up the creek without a paddle. So then you have your Garmin to at least get you out, especially in some of the situations that we're getting ourselves into in this back countries when we're back there a couple of miles. That's nice to have.
Yeah. No, for sure. Sweet. So you said water filter, food, or I guess fire, Onyx.
Yep.
What else?
So this one's a big one. For a while there, I used to take a hatchet because a hatchet was something you could split a pelvis with when you're out there in the
Mm,
backcountry. Made it nice, but I recently switched over to like a foldable saw. HME makes them, Husky makes them. You can get them at like any Lowe's or Home Depot. But the foldable saws are super nice. If you're building a shelter or anything else, a saw just makes really quick work of anything, and it's always clean. And especially if you're trying to make like firewood at camp and stuff, but also for splitting a pelvis, it's easy. Or going down a vertebrae, splitting them in half when you're cutting up the ribs. I just like having a saw now, so I'll take a foldable saw with me. Almost anytime I'm going backcountry, I got a saw with me.
cool. That's a good items to have for sure. Now on the gear list, let's talk about arrows. I
Yeah,
know we kind of talked about the unfortunate events with Vector. And for those that don't know, Vector is no longer selling arrows. We won't go into details as far as what happened with the company. It was just unfortunate what ended up happening. But would that be, I guess not Vector, Method. Apologize. I knew them as Vector, and then they went to Method, and now, yeah, no longer selling arrows, no longer in business. But with that being said, you're looking at some other arrows, um, and kind of walk me through why you've chosen those arrows that you're going to end up building out.
yeah, definitely. And real quick, one other thing that I do take that not a lot of people might know is Night Eyes. Night Eyes makes
Mm,
like a little carabiner thing that holds up to 500 pounds, and it's got a one-way pull system on it. So when you have 550 cord, if you're out there by yourself, like a lot of times I am, flipping over an elk might be difficult, but
mm-hmm.
it's got the one-way pull system on it. So I'll use that to pull game or hang up tarps and stuff. And that's just a little carabiner, and that's one thing I slap in there as well. But as far as arrows, so I'm shooting the Easton Pro Comps, and man, like I shot the Axis Long Range Match Grade, the FMJs, and for me, I'm not striving for an extremely heavy arrow. I like to have kind of a middle of the road arrow between about 480 and right around like 500 grains, like depending on what poundage I'm shooting, if it's 75 or
And
80.
what's your draw length?
I'm 29 and a half inches. I'll shoot 75 or 80 pounds usually.
Cool.
Um,
I just think that's important when people hear, arrow grains. You need to know. I don't hear a lot of people, they throw out arrow grains, but they don't really preface it with their draw length.
yeah,
And I think that's important for people to understand. Draw length does matter because you're an inch to an inch and a half, depending on the bow, longer in draw length than mine. So you're going to be at least 10 to 15 grains per inch heavier, depending on the arrow you're shooting. But anyway, so 480 to 510, you said?
About 500. Yeah, I shoot for about
500.
500. Just for me, those setups give me a tighter pin gap. They allow me to shoot a little further because, as you've seen, I like to shoot my bow at some crazy distances from 400 yards to 150 yards usually. Just at targets, I never would shoot animal that far, but I like
Mhm.
to take my target archery as far as I can, just to have fun with it. Um, but yeah, so I was testing all those arrows out, and I landed with the Easton Pro Comps because they've got me at about 490, and with my bow, I'm getting some pretty good speeds out of them. Not crazy fast. It's about 288 is what I'm getting right now to about 290 ish. So it's still a good speed for fixed blade broadheads and mechanicals. I'm not getting that plane as bad. And the pro comps, when it comes to tuning, man, these things tune up like a dream for me. So switched over to those, and I absolutely love them. And I got the titanium half out there in front, so the
Mm.
hole's a little bit bigger in the front, allowing for that deeper penetration.
Awesome. The titanium half out made by Easton.
Made by Easton, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Have you messed around with MFJJ's titanium half outs at all?
I haven't, not yet.
Okay. All right, but have you seen them?
I have seen them, yeah.
Okay, so I've actually got some. I'll show people here. They're sitting. I know it looks like a science experiment in there, but
Yeah.
and some acetone because I actually sent one in Texas. I sent one into a rock, and unintentionally, obviously, I wasn't aiming for the rock,
Yeah.
but I hit a little low on a target, and it went through and smacked a rock. The field tip is flat as can be. But what it did was it shoved directly right back into the arrows, and the arrows I'm shooting are RIP TKOs, and it mushroomed it out. But I was able to, and that's why I've got him sitting in there trying to get the glue off of them. But it mushroomed out the carbon, but it went straight back, and it's not bent at all. And so I can, I just cut the carbon off, and I'll soak them in acetone for a little bit and get the glue off of it, and I'll just pop them in another arrow. But yeah, they're not bent or anything. So that titanium, although pricey, because titanium definitely costs more. I'm sure the Easton ones were more expensive than the regular brass or other inserts that you've got. But yeah, that titanium's worth it. And things that I don't know. You can go down that rabbit hole of aluminum versus titanium, etc. And I think there's very small, like if you shoot your arrows a lot, I can see the benefit of it because the aluminum could bend possibly if you're shooting a lot of foam, possibly hitting rebar, you're sending it into rocks or whatever on accident. It could bend the aluminum, which could cause issues with your arrow. I personally have never really had any issues with the Victory aluminum outserts. I've had some that did end up bending, and all I had to do was pop them out, and the arrow was fine. The arrow spun great. Um, I've sent them through some shoulder blades, and the aluminum outserts were great. So between those and these titaniums, I've never had any issues with either one, to be honest with you, as far as performance goes. But it all comes down to, in my opinion, cutting the arrow straight, squaring it off, making sure it's seated right as far as your outsert, spinning your arrows, making sure things are good to go. And then I want to ask you, do you cut your arrows as short as possible to where it's basically no more carbon left when it's touching the rest, or how do you do it?
So I cut went out so a little different. If these half outs here that I have, they sit on the carbon and they stick out a little bit from the carbon.
Mm-hmm.
So with these pro comps, what I'm doing is I'm cutting it so that when the half out is on there, the half out, if this was the riser of my bow, the half out is like just poking out. So when I screw the tip on there or the broadhead, it's just sticking out just in front of my bow.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to get it as short as I can where it's still comfortable to shoot. Um, and I think I just do that mainly to have the weight come out good because if I do bump it up, then I do hit those 500 grain marks a
Mm-hmm.
little more and I lose a little bit of distance downrange. So I do try to shrink it up and I hit that 490 to 488 ish mark.
So, and I'm just asking because this is, things that are, I guess, coming up right now. But why don't you cut it even shorter to where you're basically where your rest is? Say this is your rest right here, I guess,
Yeah.
sideways here. I'm gonna do this wrong, but anyway, that's the top of your rest, and the carbon is here. Maybe I've got some. We'll say the pin's carbon.
Yeah.
why don't you cut it to where it's barely on the rest, and then right past the pin right here is your outsert.
So do you I think it's called a shag pad or whatever. I think that's what Vapor Trail calls it. Do you run the little rubber piece that goes on to hold your arrow off the riser from the rest? It's like a little rubber it goes on your shelf.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when I cut it that close, I've noticed if I draw back, because it's got those two little U's,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the orientation of your broadhead, your blades can touch that. And I've seen it on my bow where I had a blade oriented down and it moved the arrow a little bit. So I like to keep the arrow just in front, or the broadhead blade just in front, so
Mm-hmm.
it's not gonna touch maybe or anything inside that riser. And I don't have to worry about thinking, oh, is it gonna bump this or is it oriented right? I just
Hmm.
run it just in front just to get rid of that what if.
I guess I haven't thought of. So when you're drawing back your broadheads, like it's still down enough to where it'll hit the little U cup that's at the end there.
So depending on how your blade, I've noticed
Mm-hmm.
there were what were they? I believe they're buzz cuts I was had on there,
Mm-hmm.
and when the blade was pointed straight down, due to that pad, even though the rest was up, the blade
Mm-hmm.
could touch one of those if it wasn't
Hmm.
oriented, and it would push the tip just a little bit. And I noticed it because when I shot one, I was like, oh, I hit way left, and I couldn't figure out why.
Mm.
And I looked at it, and it had a little cut in that pad. I was like, so it touched. And from then on, also, I mean, a lot of people have their hand right there, so I just figured, I'm just going to cut them flush with the riser, and then I'll put the blade out in front of the riser, and I have nothing to worry about in that little area.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. So this is, and I grabbed an arrow because it's definitely a better example, but
Yeah.
I make it to where basically the rest is right there,
Yeah, so then
like at
your
the end of the
tip is
carbon.
like right at the front of your riser then, right?
On these, yeah. And
Yeah.
then I'm trying to think if I have any my other ones, but with the half outs, because like this right here, that little this part right here is actually carbon, so it's almost like a collar in a way,
Yeah.
because that aluminum covers the carbon. But on the half outs, I cut it to where the half outs are butted up against the carbon there,
Yep.
and I wish I had some here so we could talk about it. But anyway, like I will cut it that short, so it's like where the rest is still sitting here,
Yeah.
and then the half outs right there, and then the blades right here. So
Heck,
I don't know. And I just wanted to ask just because obviously you've been shooting a bow longer than I have, so I just wanted to see what you've got, like why you do it that way. But no, it makes sense. Makes sense. I've never had that issue, I guess, where it actually interfered with the little pad that I had interfere with the blade. So do you just shoot really wide broadheads, or were those buzz cuts kind of wide?
they were a wider blade style, and I just
Mm,
noticed once I noticed they touched, I was like, huh, maybe I don't want to have to think about it if like a blade could touch that. It shouldn't
yeah.
touch that, but it was clocked just perfectly. It wasn't straight up and down. It was
Mm,
clocked just perfectly where it touched
yeah.
that side. And I was like, man, I don't want to have to worry about that.
Mm,
So I've since then I shoot severed broadheads. So honestly, I really don't have anything to worry
yeah.
about there. But yeah, if I was gonna throw a fixed blade on there, it's just a thought that I had one day, and when I noticed the broadhead went off on me, I was like, I've been shooting pretty good. And I looked, and it had a little cut on there, and I noticed that the blade, when I knocked it and had the spine right, the blade was sitting like this, and of course that U's down here, so it came across the side of the U and was
Mm-hmm.
touching this side of the pad, and I was like, oh,
Hmm.
and it was just the top half of it, but as you know, once you're at full draw, the tension on everything else, just a micro touch here and there can make a big difference once you get down range.
100%. 100%. Cool. I guess what haven't we talked about, whether it be with media or hunting or archery, that you'd like to talk about as far as like, something you want to leave for the listeners, or something you want to bring up?
I do like the conversation about like poundage and arrows. Like that's always a hot topic. Like, a lot of people like to talk about that, and I see a lot of different things. And recently, I mean, we were talking about it there for a little bit. Dudley and everybody else, they're talking about going back to the fundamentals of everything else, and that's awesome. I really like that that's coming up because I've worked on a lot of bows. Some might not know it, but when I worked at Sportsman's Warehouse, I was a bow tech there, and I worked helping people at Bow Tech in Eugene. So did a lot of work there. Um, and you'd see people come in, and they're always chasing either heavy weight or heavy poundage, and it's an interesting topic to see people what they chase and the reasons why. Sometimes their only reason why is, oh, I saw it on YouTube, or oh, well, this is what you need to blow through a 2x4 at 60 yards, and it's like, well, are you hunting Cape buffalo or are you hunting elk? Like, it's always a
Yep,
fun topic.
exactly. What's interesting is, Dudley just did a podcast with Ranch Fairy, Troy.
Yeah,
And so I recommend that people go and listen to that because it's a lot of eye-opening information. But basically what I gathered from that is, one, there's no real, and I think by the time this podcast comes out, people will realize this, there's not really any beef. Like people are talking about right now, that there's some beef going on. There's really not. It's just that Dudley doesn't want people to see go backward. He doesn't want to see people go backwards in their archery skills because they latched onto that heavy arrow mentality. And Troy, uh, I think people watch his stuff and take it to the bank or treat it as gospel. And what they don't realize is that, yes, he's been shooting a bow for a while, but and he says this in the podcast. He's one, he's never killed an elk, and two, he doesn't know proper shooting technique. And so when people are taking this 600, 700 grain arrow, 300 grain broadhead stuff and going and changing their whole setup for it, that's what Dudley's talking about is, well, how about you focus on your technique and your
yeah,
accuracy? And then if you really want to have a bigger pin gap on your sight, then, talk about that. But if you're hitting in the right spot, and those, like, you're shooting mechanicals, that's another hot conversation, is fixed versus mechanical. And I like both. They both do
yeah,
great things, and for different reasons. Each tool is for a different thing. And if you're shooting mechanicals, you need to stay away from the shoulder. It's as simple as that. There's a lot of vitals behind the shoulder that you don't need to go through the shoulder. And even with a fixed broadhead, you probably shouldn't be aiming towards that scapula area. And I think people just need to stick with the fundamentals. I'm relatively new, almost 5 years into shooting a bow,
yeah,
and I was blessed with not having to. I didn't have any bad habits coming into archery, and I latched on to people like Dan Staten, Joel Turner, listening to Dudley's School of Knock, or whatever it's called, School of Archery, that he does free information on YouTube. And I would video myself, and there was actually I'm going to forget his name, but he worked at the Bow Rack for the longest time. Now he works at G4. Um,
Inside Out Precision. It's Kellen.
yes,
Yeah,
yep. So he was a big help too. Is he on one of his videos said, "Hey, anyone out there that wants help, send me videos." And I took him up on that, and he legitimately walked me through some things. He was like, "Hey, you're probably about an inch to a half inch short on your draw. You looked a little cramped. This and that and the other," and like walked me through some stuff. And so all of that combined, I'm not the world's best shooter, but I'm consistent, and I attribute that to it was kind of self-coaching, but at the same time, like latching on to gathering the information from people that are better than me is what
yeah.
it boils down to, and not thinking that I'm the greatest, because I'm definitely not.
I think that's a huge mindset to have. Like I told you early on in the podcast, Henry Bass and Michael Harrington kind of got me into it, and I started in target archery. And I mean, even though I was shooting bows, and I'm, let's say, 11 years in now, it I will walk up to somebody, and I won't say, "Oh, I've shot a bow for 11 years now,"
Mm-hmm.
this and that. No, like the first thing is, I'm kind of new to archery. What do you do that makes you so good? And like I try to pick their brain, and again, it's kind of like with the photography, you get all the recipes that you need, or all the ingredients you need to make what you need to, and you make what works best for you, when it
Yep.
comes to archery. And when you're talking about that as well, the bow rack, I mean, these guys, uh, Kellen was a huge influence. Once I started going to the bow rack and talking to him, I was getting information from him. Wayne Endicott, I was picking his brain and kind of learning about stuff. And they kind
You
of,
want to talk about someone that's a wealth of knowledge but doesn't put it out there on social media? freaking Wayne Endicott. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him, but one day that's a goal of mine, is to go and meet him when I'm up in Oregon. And he is someone that has killed a lot of stuff and has tuned a lot of bows and has shot a lot of bows. He's got a ton of knowledge.
He's like a silent killer out there right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of people know about him, but when it comes to archery, that man knows exactly what he's doing and knows how to shoot a bow extremely well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But yeah, and talking to him too, he talked to me and he's like, I see people spending all this money on these heavy arrows and all this and that. And he's like, look, there's applications for it. And what I took from it is basically, if you were going on an elk hunt, it's pretty common sense for most people. You're not taking a 22 rifle, right? You're going to take something of caliber, but you also don't really need a 338 Lapua or a 50 cal. Like there's you and me and probably everybody else knows there's a point at which there's overkill and there's underkill, but then there's the point where you get that middle range. And kind of when it comes to arrows, what I've gathered over the years and talking to Wayne and all of them is that there is the point at which you're so far under your speed chaser and it's like throwing a toothpick. Like it's not really practical. And then there's a point at which you get so heavy you blow that practicality out of the water and your pin gaps you're only getting like 40 yards. So there's those middle grounds where I think, like for me, I like to shoot distance with my arrows, but I still like to have a good arrow to hunt with. And with the arrows I have on my sight right now, I can shoot out to 160 yards with pins. I have pins out to 160, but that arrow can also harvest anything. And I've shot plenty of deer with it out to 70. So I know, and gotten pass throughs at 70. So I know the setup is tried, true, and tested. I mean, that buck right there was shot at 71 yards with a severed broadhead, Easton Pro Comp, perfect pass through. But like you were saying before, it comes down to shot placement. So if you're gonna shoot a bow, you gotta be able to shoot a bow and group decently. And then from there, I think you can tweak, oh, should I go mechanical or is my poundage enough to even do that? Like start out with just like what Dudley and everybody else is saying now, the fundamentals. Get the shooting down and make sure you're comfortable there. And then tinker with the setup that works best for you, but isn't, underkill or overkill.
Exactly. Yep. And it's I can't remember what Dudley said exactly. I'm not going to quote him well, but basically he's saying, spend 10 minutes a day on the range rather than going and changing your whole setup and spending 2 days retuning your bow and doing all this other stuff. Like you can be such a better archer and so much more effective as a hunter if you just spend that time working on your shot process, working on, your aim, getting your sight dialed in, all of those things, and learning your process even better than what's the newest fanciest gadget that's going to make, because it's not going to change anything for you. And there's so many things, like I just say, for example, I shot my first bow as a Hoyt, and I think it's on the ground back there. And I won't ever get rid of that bow because it was my first one. And then, I shot a Matthews all last year, and I really wanted to like that bow, but there's just something about it. Like I shot it well. There's just something about it. I never really settled in to it. And that's me personally. So then I went back and grabbed the VTM 31. That one seemed to fit me well, was shooting well. And then got my hands on that Mach 34 right there. And, I've never shot anything longer than a 31-inch axle to axle bow. And that thing just felt like butter. And, and so it's all, it doesn't really matter. The bow brand doesn't matter what broadhead brand, you just want something sharp. You want something that will cut, and you don't need the newest, fanciest everything. Just what you need is to up your skills and to practice.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the bows there, because when I was doing like bow tech work and stuff, I would see people come into the shop, and the first thing, like, it's funny, but I'd see people come in and they'd be like, give me a Hoyt and set it to 80 pounds. And I'm like, you want a Hoyt at 80 pounds? Why? Like, oh, Cam Hayes shoots 80 pounds. I want 80 pounds. I'm like, so are you getting a Hoyt because you want a Hoyt, or because you see somebody shooting a Hoyt and you want it at 80 pounds? I'm like, how about we start you off at like 60 pounds and see if you can draw 60 comfortable. And like, sometimes these guys who want 80 pounds, they're like, okay, 70 is quite a bit. Let's stop there. And it's like, you see people, again, like getting the recipe, like you see people doing stuff. That doesn't mean that you have to do that. Like, get something that works best for you. You said you shot a Matthews. It's something that didn't set right. You switched over, you shot a bow that felt good, but then you just found a bow that just was like money, You got too hot, too cold, and just right. So like you might be dead set on a Hoyt because Cam Hanes shoots a Hoyt, or a Matthews because Levi Morgan shoots a Matthews, right? Or a PSE because Dudley shoots a PSE. And yeah, they're great bows and they'll shoot and they'll do everything for you. But if you're not comfortable shooting the bow, you'll always be fighting the bow. So get something that originally you're comfortable with and you shoot well. And then from
Mm-hmm.
there, it's the progression. And yeah, feel
Yep.
free to shoot other bows and make sure maybe the newer model fixed the problem that you had with the other one. But find something that fits you. Once you get that figured out, get the fundamentals down, get your groups down, and then from there, go ahead, tinker with your arrows. Find a weight that gets you the distance you want, the speed you want with the broadhead or fixed blade, or excuse me, expandable that you want. Like tinker with it. But definitely, I agree with you. Finding one that just feels right, because there's no point in just getting frustrated the whole time. You're just
Mm-hmm.
gonna always be changing and you'll never progress. You'll just kind of hit a stalemate where you're like, oh, I can shoot a bow, but can't shoot a bow good.
Yep. And something that I heard, so that's the other thing too. People talk about hand shock a lot. Draw cycle is important, but like when you're first shooting it in the shop, you get used to whatever draw cycle of the bow. Eventually, when you shoot enough arrows, all the other bows are going to feel weird after you get used to that one draw cycle. I think there's definitely a lot of other, like your string angle is very important. That's going to affect your accuracy a lot more than hand shock. People are like, oh, I felt the hand shock. I'm like, well, hand shock, you're not going to be, when you shoot that buck, you're not going to be sitting there, oh man, my bow vibrated a little bit more after the shot. Like, you're not going to be thinking that. What's important about hand shock, and why I think people that know about it talk about it, is because it demonstrates the efficiency to transfer energy to the arrow rather than your riser. And a lot of people don't realize that. They just hear people say, oh, there's more hand shock here, or, oh, there's a dull vibration, blah blah blah. And that seems to be the thing that people talk about in their bow reviews. And I'm like, well, I know some of these people know this. Why don't you say it more? But it's got to do with the efficiency of the bow rather than the feel of it after the shot. Because again, you're going to be shaking like a leaf no matter what you shoot, whether it's a spike, doe, cow, biggest bull you've ever seen. Like, you're going to be shaking after you've killed something and sent an arrow through a body. So that hand shock's not really going to matter. And again, the draw cycle isn't at, you know, everyone's different, but what really matters is that string angle and just kind of how you settle into it. Are you able to be consistent with that same, process with the bow? And then again, yeah, I mean, every bow riser is a little bit different as far as the angle, that your hand naturally sits in. I know Hoyts have changed it recently, but they used to be a little bit more high wristed, which felt comfortable for me because I'm used to shooting Glocks, which are also a very similar grip angle. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but go into it with an open mind, because you're not getting a paycheck to shoot any of these bows.
Exactly.
Like Cam
Yeah.
Hanes is getting paid, guys. Levi Morgan's getting paid. Dudley's getting paid. Like, they like the companies, that's why they work with them, but they're also getting paid to shoot those bows. You're not. Going with an open mind. You're going to be spending the same amount of money, whichever brand you go with. Um, and just go shoot the bows. That's what I recommend to people. Even though what works for me, if you shoot a Matthews, you love Matthews, they're great bows. I shoot PSE. I've shot Hoyt. I've shot Matthews. I like the Bowtex. The new Bowtex are pretty sweet as well. Like, there's so many different options out there. That's what's so great about it, is go into a shop, get them set up, plan on spending probably 2 hours and then sleeping on it, and
Yeah.
not just making the purchase right there. Bow shops are going to hate me for saying that. Sorry, Wild Arrow. But like, you go in, think about it, sleep on it, come back and make that decision. Don't just YouTube it and see what everyone's shooting. So,
Yeah. I'm glad.
although yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was glad you said something about these guys are paid to shoot it. If you look at Dudley's or Levi Morgan's career, they've both shot different bows and they've both promoted those other bows. And when it comes down to that, it's important to understand that it's not the bow, it's the archer. The archer can pick up any one of those bows. We could give Dudley a Genesis bow and he's probably going to be a Hawkeye with it. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
can shoot a bow. So you just got to realize it's what comes out to be comfortable for you. And yes, they shoot those bows, and yes, those bows shoot good. And I'm not dissing on any bow company, but it's important to figure out what bow shoot's good for you. There was a time there where I shot prime bows, and when I had that prime, I think it was the Black 5. That bow just shot really well for me and was really accurate for me. So that was the bow I hunted with. And I kind of just pick up a bow and I'll shoot all the bows. And I'm like, oh, okay, these ones, I can't group with very well, and there's nothing on them. So if I put stuff on them, I'm not gonna group probably any better. So if I can shoot a good group with a bare bow from a shop, then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look at those bows, and then it's gonna come down to feel and everything else after that. But at first, it's just a group I'm looking for, and then boom, pick up a bow from there. It doesn't matter if one year I'm shooting Matthews, the next year I'm shooting Elite, or I go to Bowtech. Like if I like the bow and it shoots well for me, then that's probably going to be the bow. More than likely, that's the bow I'm going to shoot, because I want to shoot comfortable and accurate before anything else.
Exactly. Yep. 100%. Well, we went down this rabbit hole, and I absolutely love archery rabbit hole. But yeah, what else? I guess, is there anything that you want to leave with the audience here as we wrap things up, that I don't know, words of advice or anything you want to leave with the audience? And then, of course, where can they find you at?
Yeah, so I would say if anybody's out there and they're looking into getting into photography, and yes, it's a saturated market, I would just say don't be nervous to go out there and just start shooting with your own style, and then be prepared to have constructive criticism, or find a few photographers that you like their content already and ask them, say, hey, what gear do you recommend starting out with? Because you don't need the best of the best to start out with. I started out with the Canon 80D, it's $800 setup. But just find something that works best for you there, start it out, and then just ask people for information and progress from there. If you get caught up on trying to just be the best at the best right away, I feel like, and then you don't take the criticism because my photos are perfect, like you're gonna just dig yourself a hole and it's not gonna work out. If you want to see progression, I'd say ask a lot of people. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and just do it. Like go out there and just start taking photos. Maybe you come up with a new style that one day you see somebody else starting to copy, and it's like, oh wow, this guy's taking a bow and getting rid of the archer and it's full draw in midair, and everybody's like, how is he doing that? Like just do you and see what sticks. That's what I would say. Same with
Perfect.
archery, just like the bows, just do you. If it does good and it sticks, just run with it.
Perfect. I love it. And where can they find you at, Josh?
You guys can find me on Instagram. My Instagram name is HUBBZ14, and that's only spot I'm at right now.
Perfect. Awesome, guys. I'll leave the link down below for you to be able to go check out Josh's photography. He's got some awesome skills, guys. He knows what he's doing. That's why I brought him on here, because he caught my eye, and then we started chatting. He's a cool dude, and wanted to pick his brain a little bit. So, that being said, guys, thanks again so much for tuning in here. And like I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.